We gotta wrap some Pokemon.
You just do the singing. I'll take care of the hard part.
Let's get it on.
I wanna eat the best tasting Pokemon. These are the Pokemon that I wanna eat.
Exeggutor, Fido, Appleton, Sinistea, Slowpoke, Slurpuff, Bounce, Krabby, Vanilla, Ditto, Tropius, Cherubi, Magikarp, Miltank, Smoliv, Creamy.
I'm gonna eat them all. Pokemon!
What's more traumatizing, the idea of me eating all the Pokemon or my horrific singing and rapping? Either way, I'm gonna stop torturing you and move on to talk about My Pokemon Cookbook. So My Pokemon Cookbook is actually not my Pokemon Cookbook. It's actually written and put together by one of my favorite cookbook authors, Victoria Rosenthal, and is the latest thing to bring together two things that go oh so well together: Pokemon and food. I just finished my playthrough of Scarlet and Violet, so the spirit of Pokemon is alive and well in me, which makes me super excited for this cookbook. This cookbook categorizes the recipes by the different regions in the Pokemon games from Kanto to Galar. In each region chapter, you'll find 6 recipes, each based on a featured Pokemon that made its debut in that generation of Pokemon game. Flipping through the book, you'll notice how vibrant and fun the overall design is. The food photos are very colorful and creatively plated, with accompanying Pokemon illustrations that give you a visual idea of what the recipe is drawing inspiration from. What's really impressive is that not only do the recipes try to represent the Pokemon visually, but also thematically as well. A lot of thought went into considering the unique characteristics and typing of each Pokemon to influence the flavor profiles. For example, a lot of fire-type Pokemon have recipes that are spicy or require cooking. Grass types are very fresh with an emphasis on veg. Water types are drinks. Electric types have sour elements, and so on. I really love that attention to detail. A lot of the recipes look super cute and really delicious that I didn't even realize until later that this is mainly a vegetarian cookbook, which I totally get. It might be kinda traumatic to some folks if the recipe suggested we were actually eating that Pokemon, even though in the intro I said I'd eat them all, but hey, I'm a monster. But come on, some of them look really tasty. Out of all of the recipes, only 3 are non-vegetarian. 2 of those have fish and 1 has gelatin. Other than that, there's no meat in this cookbook, but I don't really miss it since everything looks delicious. And even though this cookbook was designed to be very accessible and family friendly, there are still some harder recipes and legit cooking skills needed for them. I can't help but compare this to the other Pokemon cookbook that I made a video on before. That cookbook was clearly geared towards kids with very simple food and an emphasis on aesthetics. This cookbook, however, has some legit dishes with a heavy focus on flavor and does not shy away from the cooking process, but at the same time still retaining that artistic whimsy to make the food look fun and quintessentially Pokemon. By far the cutest cookbook I've ever seen. But the only way to make sure that this isn't style over substance is to give these recipes a try. I may not be eating them all, but I'll eat at least 3 of them. Starting in the Kalos region to try a heaping bowl of Dedenne Ramen. First, we gotta make some Ajitsuke Tamago. In a medium pot, bring some water to a boil and place in 4 eggs to cook covered for 6.5 minutes. Then remove them from the heat and run them under cold water, then place them in an ice bath to rest for 5 minutes. This will stop it from cooking and make it easier to handle. Then carefully peel off the shells from the eggs. Then mix together half a cup of soy sauce, a quarter cup of sugar, a quarter cup of water, and 2 tablespoons of vegetarian oyster sauce. You're supposed to combine these all in a resealable bag, but I thought I could get away with placing them in these containers. After being stubborn and realizing it wasn't gonna work out, I finally switched to a bag, and yeah, much better. Let this marinate in your fridge for 24 hours. When the eggs have marinated, it's time to make the curry. Mix together a quarter cup of all-purpose flour, 1.5 tablespoons of ground garam masala, 1.5 tablespoons of ground turmeric, a teaspoon of ground fennel, a teaspoon of ground fenugreek seeds, half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and half a teaspoon of ground cayenne pepper. Now in a small non-stick pan, melt some butter over medium-high heat and fry up the spice mixture until the butter is all absorbed. Then add in 3 tablespoons of tomato paste, 2 teaspoons of tonkatsu sauce, and 1 tablespoon of honey. Combine it all together, then set aside. In a large pot, heat up a tablespoon of canola oil over medium heat and fry up half a red onion sliced up and 5 thinly sliced shiitake mushrooms. Cook these for about 5 minutes. Then add in 5 cups of vegetable broth, 2 golden potatoes and 2 carrots, all cut up to bite-sized pieces. Bring everything to a boil and then reduce the heat to a simmer. Cook this covered for 20 minutes. By now the veg should be soft and it's time to take small portions of that curry roux you made and mix this in the broth 1 ladle at a time until all the roux is mixed in. Lastly, add in a 1/4 cup of soy sauce and let this simmer for 5 minutes. Now that we got the egg and curry, time to assemble our Dedenne. Ladle in some curry on the upper half and some noodles on the bottom half to serve as the belly. The recipe also calls for aburage tofu, which is a big sheet of fried tofu, but unfortunately I can only find the Chinese style, which are much smaller, so unfortunately my Dedenne is going to have some lines in the middle and won't look as flawless as the cookbooks. Place the eggs for the ears and some nori, carrots, ginger and scallions for the facial details, and that's it. A nice heaping bowl of Dedenne ramen. Next, we travel to the Hoenn region for this cookbook spin on the Spinda raspberry marble cake. This is the recipe that got the most votes on my Patreon, so I gotta try it out. First, we gotta take 4 ounces of fresh raspberries and puree them in a blender. Then take your raspberry puree and press it through a mesh strainer so that you only have the liquid and not the seeds. Then add in 2 drops of red food dye and 1 drop of orange. I didn't have orange, however, so I'm just doing another drop of red and a drop of yellow. Mix it up and set aside. In a medium bowl, mix together 2 cups of cake flour with 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, and then set this aside. In a stand mixer, whip a 2/3 cup of room temperature unsalted butter until it's fluffy. Then add in 1 cup of sugar and mix it in. Now add in 4 room temperature egg whites and a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Combine that well. Then add in half of the flour mixture we put together earlier. Then add in 2/3 cup of room temp buttermilk and mix until smooth. Add in the remaining flour mixture and combine everything well. Next, we gotta separate the mixture into 2, and to 1/2 add in the raspberry puree. The color is much lighter than I expected, so I added in some more food coloring. This time I added red gel coloring to get a more vibrant look. Finally, in some oiled up mini loaf pans, alternately spoon in the white and pink batters to create a Spinda-like pattern and bake these in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 18 to 25 minutes. Let them rest for 5 minutes before removing them from the pan. These spiral patterns aren't part of the actual recipe, but I think they complete the look, so I just used candy melts to draw the spiral shapes and added them to the cakes when they hardened. Now we're ready to have these super cool looking Spinda cakes. For our last stop, we head over to Alolan to have a nice tall glass of Alolan Exeggutor Tall Tropical Slushie. Super simple recipe. In a blender, add in 9 ounces of frozen mango chunks, 12 ounces of frozen pineapple, 4 ounces of ice, and 1.5 cups of coconut water. When I blended mine, it was still a bit too thick, so I ended up adding more coconut water for a runnier consistency. Place it all in a tall glass. I had some grapes lying around, so I figured, hey, why don't I add some of these to be the Exeggutor heads? I also added some mint leaves to make it look more like a tree, and now you can say aloha to this nice refreshing glass of Exeggutor Slushie. Finally, let's eat! Starting off with this bowl of Dedenne ramen. Gonna try the tofu garnish, but it's pretty meh, so let's get all that decorative stuff out of the way and get to the nitty gritty. The curry is pretty delicious. The sauce is glossy and smooth, and the soft veggies give it a velvety texture. The flavor is actually a lot stronger than I expected. I'm often used to Japanese curry being on the lighter side, but this is pretty strong and savory. This is good with noodles, but I can see this being amazing with white rice, and that's probably how I'm gonna eat the leftovers. The tamago is great with curry and it gives it a nice sweet contrast. Really loving the flavors all around. Let's move on to the Spinda raspberry cakes. These turned out pretty cool. I really like the contrast in colors. Taste-wise, this is also very tasty. Loving the texture of it. It's got kind of a bounce and springiness to it. Kind of reminds me of mochi cakes. Nice bit of tartness from the buttermilk and raspberries. And it also tastes pretty good with the spiral candy melts too, because it gives it a bit of a crunch and creaminess. I definitely dig this one. Time to wash it all down with the Exeggutor Slushie. Again, pretty tasty and refreshing. Definitely very tropical tasting with the coconut notes and the acidity from the pineapple and mango. I think using fresh fruits instead of frozen would yield a stronger fruit flavor, but I kinda like how convenient this is to make, since you can just whip out frozen fruits from the freezer anytime without having to worry about them going bad. I can see myself making this one again. Final verdict for my Pokemon Cookbook: cutest cookbook ever.
Eat them, gonna eat them all. Gonna eat them all. Eat them, gonna eat them all. Gonna eat them all, Pokemon. Eat them, gonna eat them all. Pokemon.